Good morning. Good morning from Paris. Hello to everyone, wherever you are sitting around the globe. I'm so happy to welcome you to the third session of our webinar series on technological revolution and regional order in East Asia, organized by the Center for Asian Studies here at Ifri, Paris. After discussing the politics and then the economics of technology in the region, in this particular region, we will focus today on the security issues towards the state. So we'll be talking about the situation of cyber threats, cyber attacks, and perhaps also countermeasures in East Asia, a region where security matters and stability is already challenging, and where cyber weapons contribute to complexify this strategic landscape. To discuss these issues, I am delighted to welcome our two distinguished speakers, one sitting in Tokyo, Japan, and the others in Singapore. Thanks to their geographic location and expertise, they are going to provide us with insight on the northern and the southern part of the region we are interested in, namely Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia. So our first speaker is Mr. Jun Osawa, a senior research fellow at the Institute for International Policy Studies, the IIPS in Tokyo. He works on Northeast Asian international relations, East Asian maritime security and cyber security, as well as Japanese foreign policy. Mr. Osawa has been concurrently a member of the K-Daijun Study Group on Cyber Warfare and Defense, the Cabinet Office's Advisory Panel on Communication Concerning Territorial Integrity, as well as a senior lecturer at the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force Staff College since 2008. He was also a policy planning advisor and an intelligence analyst for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And our second speaker, who will focus on Southeast Asia, is Mr. Benjamin Ang, a senior fellow at the Center of Excellence for National Security, the CENS, which is based at the Rajarathnam School of International Studies at the Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. So he leads the Cyber and Homeland Defense Program of the CENS, which explores policy issues around the cyber domain, international cyber norms, cyber threats and conflict, and so on. Benjamin Ang has a multifaceted career since he is also a lawyer. He notably worked as IT director and general manager of a major Singapore law firm, where he specialized in technology law and intellectual property issues. So just before ceding them the floor, let me remind you some basics. And I'm sure you're already all accustomed of these rules. You have a question box on the right of your screen. And if you don't see it, you probably should open the button on the top right of your screen. So feel free to write down your question whenever you want during the session. And I do my best to summarize them and pass them on to our two panelists during the discussion. So without further delay, I will give the floor to Mr. Jun Osawa for a 15 minutes presentation. Thank you all for coming and for being here. And thank you, Mr. Osawa.
Thank you, Marc. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to French Institute of International Relations for hosting this timely webinar. I'm deeply honored to be able to join this morning with such distinguished scholars and audience you on the web. So I had 5 years experience of being in charge of national cybersecurity planning in the Japanese government, and still hold a part-time position as a member of the Cabinet Office. This morning, however, I will share with you my own thought and research fellow, not as my official capacity. So I will share you with my presentation. Okay. So I will I'm going to touch with the 4-point. Now, first, recognizing the threat. What kind of cyber attack does national security focus on? The second point is recognizing the emerging cyber threat in Northeast Asia, especially cyber espionage, cyber ransomware, and cyber manipulation. So third point is contest for the supremacy in the digital arena between the US and China. And fourth, I will explain how to deter state-sponsored cyber attacks. So over the last 10 years, some states have been using cyberspace as a place to achieve strategic goals and express their intentions. That began in 2007 with the cyber attack against the Baltic states, Estonia, in pursuit of national interest. In cyberspace, the state-to-state conflict in realist world re-emerges with intensity. The more importance of cyber domain increases, the more serious and numerous threat to cybersecurity become. Thus, cybersecurity has become a top priority in the government now. Overviewing cyber attacks trend in the last decades revealed that the cyber attacks frequently follow incident of international discord or conflict. A risk of state-sponsored cyber attacks with the intent to steal classified information, disrupt critical infrastructure, and obstruct military systems are becoming more serious. So in addition to target attacks, APT, with the objective of stealing classified information, signs of attacks designed to paralyze the control system of critical infrastructure have begun to appear in recent years. And the third point, there are symptoms of new serious challenges that threaten our democratic process. A new phenomena of undermining or manipulating public opinion in democratic countries becomes serious. So attacker uses, the propaganda in cyber or fake news is or betraying the secret. So, during the 2016 presidential election in the US, it is believed that the Russian cyber attack groups APT-28 and APT-29 conducted information theft cyber attack and distributed internal information taken from the Democratic Party through the WikiLeaks. Similar information manipulation cyber attack took place in 2017 in the France, in the French presidential election and Germany general election. Now we are facing the same kind of cyber manipulation or information warfare. You can see in 2018, Taiwan faced these kind of cyber manipulation in local election. So the many experts say that is from mainland China. So now we are going to face these kind of new challenges of information warfare in Northeast Asia. So in Japan, a large-scale targeted attack aimed to stealing information from the House of Representatives, government institution, and the defense industry came to light in 2011. And similar attack with the objective of stealing information are believed to have taken place since around 2005. In May 2015, a targeted cyber attack aimed at the personal information that the Japan Pension Service possesses took place. The MDB malware was used in the cyber attack on the Japan Pension Service. The first wave of hit on May 8, 2015, and 4 more waves followed in the next 2 weeks, infecting more than 30 computers and leaking personal information on 1.25 million individuals within 1 day. within one day cyber operation from somewhere outside of the country. A technical analysis of the malware concluded that the creator of the malware was someone group of people in China who worked between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. from Monday to Friday. You can see the some graph. There is strong suspicion that the government entity is involved in this personal data breach. So APT groups in China repeatedly conducting information theft cyber attacks have been stepping up their attacks on Japan, particularly since late 2016. China is one of the leading countries to use cyberspace. China is one of the leading countries to use cyberspace for their strategic goal. Chinese cyber espionage targets almost all other countries for stealing governmental secret information, business secret, and intellectual properties. So we observe that more than 10 state-sponsored APT groups in China repeatedly conducting information theft cyber attacks, and they have been stepping up their attacks on Japan, particularly since late of 2016. So more than these kind of, you can see the 15 APT groups in the column. So these, you can see the red fonts in this chart that shows some kind of these victims that the Chinese cyber espionage group target industries and businesses, entities holding cutting-edge technology that appear on the list in Chinese recent manufacturing strategy made in China 2015. So you can see this slide. You can see the 10 key sectors, from new information technology to the agriculture machinery. They are focusing on these kind of 10 key sectors technology. So these Chinese cyber espionage are linked to the China's long-term strategy for seeking technological and economical supremacy. Thus, as you see, cyber domain becomes a real battleground of economic security between China and the developed Western countries, including Japan. So I will briefly touch upon with the North Korean cyber capability. South Korea faced a cyber attack more than severe and sophisticated than DDoS in 2013. The banks, ATMs, and broadcast news distribution system were paralyzed for several hours. And 1 year later, 2014, Sony Pictures Entertainment was attacked by the hacking group of self-proclaimed Guardian of Peace. As it afterwards transpired that the group is North Korean itself, the outcome of the attack were awful. Almost half of the company's PCs and servers were wiped off, and all of confidential material of the company, from unscreened movie script to salary list with the social security numbers, were dumped in the public. Soon after the attack, the US FBI started an investigation and confirmed a month later, in December 19, that North Korea was behind the Sony attack. So Obama administration blamed North Korea at that time. And also North Korea distributed malware WannaCry spread worldwide computer networks in May of 2017, infecting more than 300,000 computers in 150 countries within 10 days. We called it some kind of cyber pandemic. And in recent years, North Korea cyber attacking groups are targeting financial sector to obtain sufficient foreign currency to preserve its international isolated regime. UN Security Council panel of experts estimates that North Korea had obtained $2 billion through the cyber attack on financial sector, including cryptocurrency exchange. So adding to the struggle in cyber domain, there is another battlefield of digital infrastructure construction around the world. In 2015, Beijing introduced Digital Silk Road Initiative as a part of the famous Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, to improve communication connectivity Eurasian countries and China. In 2017, Beijing expanded the concept of Digital Silk Road in the field of IoT platform, such as e-commerce, digital payment, and SNS platform. Even though Chinese President Xi Jinping defends BRI as China has no geopolitical calculation in his keynote speech at the World Forum in April 2018, BRI carries a risk of being regarded as a geopolitical strategy because of the road and belt of BRI straddle completely what the Spikeman, Nicholas Spikeman called Rimland. So that the IT infrastructure building of IT infrastructure building and IoT platform become another field of competition for supremacy. So the final, So the final point is how to deter state-sponsored cyber attacks. So up to now, the national response to cyber attack has focused on passive cyber defense, such as securing cybersecurity and protection of critical infrastructure. These measures of passive defense are now insufficient. In order to stop the potential state adversaries conducting cyber attack on our national interest, Western allies have to employ the new strategy that is based on comprehensive cyber deterrence. That consists of both enhancing cyber deterrence by denial, by improving cyber robustness and resilience of the country, and enhancing cyber deterrence by punishment using the variety of policy tools from cyber attack to declaration of cyber collective defense. A more proactive cyber defense by such means as continuous monitoring of attacking groups and response to attacks using big data analysis now required. To do that, the monitoring activities of cyber adversary and accumulating vast amount of electronic information from the internet and conducting post-event analysis and follow-up using big data analysis are needed. So in the new cyber strategy of the Japanese government in 2018, Japan decided to promote the policy of proactive cyber defense that ensure the government to implement active preventive measures against the threat in advance. So lastly, I'd like to raise 3 points to enhance international cooperation. To make good use of diplomatic pressure, international society has to promote norms of state behavior in cyberspace, such as to refrain from cyber-enabled theft of intellectual property for commercial gain, not to attack critical infrastructure, and not to interfere in internal affairs by means of cyber manipulation. The second point, in order to protect the cyberspace, early detection of cyber attack is essential and warning must be shared without delay among like-minded countries. Like-minded partners should make effective use of classified meeting for exchange views on cyber threat situation awareness and potential cyber adversaries. And the immediate introduction of joint database of cyber attack or automated cyber indicator sharing system is desirable, but still years away from the realization. So my time is running out, so I stop my presentation here. Thank you very so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, June, for this very rich presentation. I have already some questions to ask, but without further delay, we will first listen to Benjamin, who will give us a focus on Southeast Asia. I am trying to unmute you, but I will leave you, Benjamin, unmute yourself. Thank you so much.
Okay, I've unmuted myself. And you should be able to see my slides, right? Marc?
Yes, we can see it perfectly.
Well, I'd like to thank Ifri for inviting me to present on this. I'm very happy to share what we know about the changing cybersecurity threats in Southeast Asia. I must say I learned a lot from Jun's presentation on Northeast Asia. Let me bring you to the part of East Asia and going through three broad headings, which I'll start off first with the cyber and the evolution in Southeast Asia. And for this, I start from home with the SingHealth breach in Singapore, which was our largest data breach. And it's 1.5 million patients' non-medical personal data, including our Prime Minister's medical data. But he was not bothered at all because his medical history has been public. He's been very transparent. So he's, as he said, there's no way to embarrass him. What really was important was that after a very long committee of inquiry where there were many witnesses and written testimonies and oral testimonies, investigations, and a 454-page report, which if you want to read, is a gripping reading. It was concluded that this was a deliberate, targeted, and well-planned cyber attack and not the work of casual hackers or criminal gangs. Here I quote the Chief Executive of the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore saying that it was something that was at a higher level and they were not going to reveal more because of operational security reasons. So a lot of private sector companies have attributed this to an advanced persistent threat, or APT. And APT activity has been going around quite a bit in Asia, in ASEAN. Let's have a look at a couple of incidents just in the years 2018 to 2019. In Singapore, Ministry of Defense and Singapore Armed Forces personnel being phished through a third-party vendor. In Singapore also, a case where a ex-level of a doctor with access to a list of 14,000 people diagnosed with HIV leaked that information. Then in Thailand and Vietnam, Toyota customer data was taken. So you can see all over in Southeast Asia and examples from all kinds of industries. For example, in Philippines, customers of Wendy's, which sells burgers, as I recall, or 900,000 customers of a pawn shop. And in Thailand and in Malaysia, customers of mobile subscribers. So those were the kind of data breaches that happened. Besides data breaches, advanced persistent threat activity was found. So the difference between that is that these were one-off incidents where you could see that customer data of a company was taken and possibly going to be used by cyber criminals to turn over to try to get access to other things like maybe credit card information, financial gain. But for advanced persistent threats, based on this report by Kaspersky, and they identified 7 different APT groups operating in Asia. You can see all the ASEAN countries were represented as targets. These groups were actually found in the networks of government organizations, political parties, defense, energy sectors, and it appeared that in this case, their goal wasn't so much profit or to steal data which could be turned around and sold, but more for economic and geopolitical intelligence gathering, which makes it one thing that this would probably be nation states who are doing this as part of the espionage. rather than cyber criminals. So there's cyber criminals, there's spies, there's also info ops. While in the past, info ops was not treated as really part of cybersecurity because cybersecurity focused more on hacking, on stealing of data. I would say in the past 5 years, we've become more aware of info ops as a cyber threat as well. And that's why I mentioned here that Facebook has been very active in taking down accounts, which are fake accounts or coordinated attacks. In the one instance in 2019, they took down accounts from Iran, an Israeli company targeting Southeast Asia, and a Russian campaign targeting Thailand. And they also took down a Chinese info ops campaign in the Philippines, which was promoting politicians who were pro-China. And of course, Facebook has to be active because they are one of the most popular ways of communicating in Southeast Asia. In some parts of Southeast Asia, they are the primary way in which people get on the internet. Because their data plan is linked to a Facebook account. So they are also the prime vector for fake news and disinformation. Then there's also cybercrime. Cybercrime in Interpol, ASEAN Cybercrime Operations Desk reported an increase in activity in 2019 of botnets, phishing, business email compromise, banking malware, ransomware, and cryptojacking. And all of these have been really growing because of the huge amount of vulnerability. In Southeast Asia, we have been very fortunate to have quicker digital transactions due to the upgrading of infrastructure. And there is greater internet connectivity, so many more people are coming onto the internet for the first time. That's leading to growing digital economies, which means that there is a lot more money now available online in transactions and in e-banking and in e-commerce. So Asia is becoming a digital asset hub. But unfortunately, as I said, many people are coming online for the first time. And many businesses are coming online for the first time. So they lack the cybersecurity investment on the business side. And for the individual users, there's low awareness. They're not as aware of the need to protect themselves from all of these botnets, phishing, email compromise. And so they become very vulnerable. Which leads me to talk about digitization and the risks. Just one example on critical infrastructure. ASEAN reached the ASEAN power grid, which works in 3 stages. First is bilateral between countries to share power, then sub-regional, which means a few of the ASEAN states would share power, and then finally to go towards a total integrated regional grid. Because ASEAN has growing power, when I talk about power, I'm talking electrical power, not political power. And it's also driven by the need to digitize because it's really part of the economy. So because of this, there are projects like the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia project where you see electrical power supply being generated in one country and spread through 4 countries, which is fantastic, it's wonderful, but it also means that it is hugely open to interference of risk. And in individual countries, smart grids are being tested, electrical power systems that use IT to generate and deliver and monitor the consumption of electrical energy, because this helps to be more efficient, to be more effective in distributing power. You don't have blackouts and brownouts. But again, these grids are all, they have an IT component and therefore they can be hacked. And because they are being exposed to the internet through edge computing and 5G, and their IoT-enabled power plants, which was never really part of the security plan, beginning when you have a power plant with 140 million points of attack. And let's not forget, this happened this year. It's a little ironic that a lot of companies who were thinking that digital transformation was years away, they had to either pivot and learn how to work from home or how to deliver their goods and services online, or they would just cease to exist. And so cyber risk because coming online for the first time, cyber risk because people are under stress because they are juggling, having to work in a home environment which was not set up for work, trying to set up all kinds of different issues, dealing with many, many different issues at the same time. Very, very stressful. And then yet receiving all this kind of information coming in, a phishing email says, that claims to be from your boss saying, I need you to read this attachment, and you click on it and it turns out to be ransomware. So all these risks have increased. So I come to the final part, which is working to avoid cyber warfare. Now, in Southeast Asia, really the focus has been on avoiding cyber warfare, to put it, I think, in simple terms. Because the ASEAN nations are not cyber offensive nations. So the ASEAN countries do not have a public policy of this, or to say, if you attack us, we attack you back. The ASEAN countries have been small and defensive. So the solution has been international partnerships on one hand. So for example, Singapore has bilateral MOUs with many countries to share cyber security knowledge and information, and to help in case of need. And also building capacity in ASEAN. With ASEAN Cyber Capacity, UN group of governmental...
Benjamin, if I can interrupt you, the connection is not so good from our side, and I wonder if you could maybe close some windows in your computer, or in order to ease a little bit the connection. Let's see if we can hear you, but it's cut somehow.
How is it now? Better?
We can hear you.
Is this,
go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
Is the visibility better?
The visibility is okay. It's just we cannot hear you very well all the time. But it looks okay. So go ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for letting me know. So as I was saying, ASEAN countries are working to avoid cyber warfare. And basically, it's through partnerships. It's through partnerships in ASEAN. It's through building capacity to help every member of ASEAN basically level up to the same level of cyber maturity, and also participating in the UN group of governmental experts and UN open-ended working group. These are two very important processes at the UN, where there are cyber norms being discussed. And this is something that Jun mentioned in his presentation. I'll talk a bit more about it in the next slide. But first, why build capacity in ASEAN? Because ASEAN needs cyberspace, because its digital transformation is necessary. And yet the ASEAN member states have different levels of cyber maturity. So you can see different reports that talk about the different levels. Some countries are more advanced in cybersecurity, and some countries have just started out. And because we're all connected, cyber attackers will attack ASEAN through the weakest member states and use those member states as launching pads. So the ASEAN Ministers Cybersecurity Conference has been working over the past 5 years, and starting in 2016, agreeing on the value of practical cybersecurity norms. And this is exactly the kind of thing that June is talking about. Norms of behavior, it's not the same as a law, because before you work out what a law should be, you need to decide what are the norms of behavior, what's acceptable. And so in 2017, they adopted the basic voluntary norms that were developed by the UN Group of Governmental Experts, or UNGGE. There are 11 norms. Some of them coincide with what June mentioned, promising not to attack each other's critical infrastructure, like power stations or telecom, which means that if you ever see some country attacking a hospital, cyber attacking a hospital, or cyber attacking a power station or telecom, that is against our norms of behavior, and we will all condemn it together. 2018, then, as the group appointed Singapore to propose a mechanism to enhance cooperation, and in 2019 move forward, and finally in 2020 announcing that Singapore and the United Nations would draw up a checklist of steps to implement these norms. So to implement these norms, you need local laws and networks of sharing of information. For example, another one of the norms is that do not let your country be used as a way to attack other people. But in order to do that, you need to share information between countries, to tell another country, hey, somebody's attacking me from a server in your country. Can you help me to? And so that's a very important part of that. And so ASEAN will share its experience and knowledge with the UN. What's next for ASEAN really is continuing to build this capacity building, because everybody needs to be at the same level to be able to communicate and to be able to help each other. And through the ASEAN Singapore Cyber Center of Excellence, or ASEAN Japan Cybersecurity Capacity Building Center, or through the US Singapore Third Country Training Program, and also UN Singapore Cyber Diplomacy Training. And the other part of it is confidence building measures like joint training between member states, joint exercises to learn how to coordinate to deal with cyber incidents, and sharing threat information, and even having a contact list that to know who to contact in each member state, so that we can actually, when an incident happens, you know who to call. And all of these basically come together to the Southeast Asian countries to be able to be more cooperative, cohesive, and therefore avoid cyber warfare in our region among each other. And also the hope is to develop norms of behavior that we will be able to have a rules-based world order where cyber warfare would not break out. So that brings me to the end, and I'm happy to take questions. And my slides are available on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, Benjamin Ang.
Thanks a lot, Benjamin. It was really interesting presentation. I already have a lot of questions from my side and from the audience. Maybe I will start with you, Benjamin, but maybe the answer on my question is in June's PPT. So feel free to react to both of you. Do you have you mentioned all the threats, the cyber threats in Southeast Asia, but you didn't talk a lot about the origin of these attacks. So do you have any clue where these attacks in Southeast Asia come from? Is there any specific origin? And if we look at June's presentation, it seems that China is one of the biggest threats. What's your reaction on that?
You know, the interesting thing about the attacks in Asia is that the private cybersecurity companies are quite open in saying that it's the usual suspects of North Korea. I mean, basically that attacks come from North Korea, Iran, Russia, China. But none of the countries have actually ever publicly attributed any attack to any other state.
Okay.
So that, yeah.
And if can you hear me? Yeah. If I can go on this issue, the Chinese, specifically the Chinese cyber attacks, seems to be oriented toward economic espionage, as June mentioned, but also you, Benjamin. so to what extent do these represent a broader security threat for critical infrastructure? For example, state critical infrastructures. Is it like only cyber espionage, or could it be a military threat? I mean, a strategic threat for a public administration. Maybe June.
Yes, we don't observe any kind of cyber intrusion against the critical infrastructure here in Japan. But some of the company who operate these kind of critical infrastructure faces the cyber espionage type intrusion from abroad. So we concern this kind of activity is the preparation process for the more severe cyber attacking in the critical situation, such as the military attack or the gray zone attacking between two countries. So that's my answer.
Okay, and just to maybe Benjamin, you wanted to react, or no?
So what the private companies have basically found is mainly APT activity that's espionage. But then the problem is that for a lot of the ASEAN countries, there isn't actually the capacity to detect if there's somebody in your critical infrastructure. So is it that we haven't seen a report because they aren't there, or is it we haven't seen a report because we can't find them? So that is why we need to be.
You also mentioned the case of Singapore, and there were attacks on Singapore military forces. So especially on the soldiers, not on the infrastructures. But what can you tell us more about this specific attack? Like where does it come from, and what was the purpose? It was just a challenge by some hackers to target the military, the Singapore's military. What do you think about that?
Okay, that is a difficult one, because the third-party vendor who was actually the victim of the attack and where the phishing came from also has other customers.
Okay.
So the biggest customer of this vendor happens to be the Ministry of Defense.
Okay. And still on cyber countermeasures or cyber defense, I had a question for June about you use a lot the term deterrence, and it's not very clear to me why do you use this specific term. I understand very well for example nuclear deterrence. We have a weapon that is so powerful that you don't want us to use it. But what are your special weapons in cyber? What is your why do you use this term instead of cyber defense, cyber countermeasures? And I will link my question to one question from the audience, from Johan, about the question about cyber strategy. Is not cyber attacks the best cyber defense? So should you deter or should you counterattack?
Thank you very much for your interesting questions. So on cyber deterrence is a little bit different from the nuclear deterrence one. But the US expert and UK expert uses these terms in cyber arena, because there is no concept and no means to stop the state-sponsored attack from abroad. So these countries introduces the analogy of cyber deterrence to use the all policy tools for cost imposition against the cyber attackers. And it is very interesting because the cyber attack is the best way to deter your enemy. So we can observe such a kind of relationship between Iran and the US, and Iran and Israel. I remember that 2013, the Iran APT group attacked the Saudi Arabia and Kuwait energy sectors. And also the Iran attacks the critical infrastructure, water dam in New York State. So to deter these kind of activities, the US introduced the counterattacking against the Iranian military organization. And it is reported that they stopped the internet connection of the command in Iran Revolutionary Army. So these kind of showing the capability to stop the networking or stop the function of the computer network in adversary countries. One of the tool to deter your enemy who attacks your country. So that's my my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I will. I have another question for you, Juni, if I may, to react on Benjamin's presentation on what are the initiative or of cooperation in terms of cyber defense in Southeast Asia. You mentioned that in your presentation that in Northeast Asia you are calling for more cooperation between the countries, but we are still not here. There's still no initiative, and it is very interesting to link the two presentations and to see that in Southeast Asia there are already initiatives. Maybe the road is still long, but there are still initiatives. So it's interesting to see that in Northeast Asia, where we have most of the greatest technological power in the world, and in Southeast Asia, it's not the case. So what do you think of this kind of initiative, and could it be a model, or could it be replicated in Northeast Asia? And I will also couple this question with a question from Julienne in the audience about reaching international norms of behavior in cyberspace. So a link to Benjamin's presentation. So this, in order to avoid information manipulation, etc. So in that respect, how do you consider the 2018 Paris call for trust and security in cyberspace? So maybe you could start, June, and Benjamin, if you want to react on this second part of the question, I'll be happy.
Regarding to the international cyber cooperation in Northeast Asia, I think the national security circumstances in Northeast Asia is quite unique, because we have the alliance between Japan and South Korea has a security treaty with the United States. So the structure of the national security in Northeast Asia is some kind of hub and spoke. The hub is the United States, and spoke connected to the South Korea or Japan, or some democratic entities such kind of Taiwan. So it is difficult to conduct the Northeast Asian country to have the one initiative to protect the cyber arena, because these kind of cyber confrontation between the country here in Northeast Asia is connected to the national security geopolitical situation between China and the US. So I think it is difficult to have such a kind of initiative in Northeast Asia, but Japanese government started the I think 6 years before to help the capacity building in Southeast Asia. That's called the Cyber Green Project. Because the ASEAN has the Singapore and Malaysia is some kind of strong country to protect its own cyber arena, but Myanmar and Cambodia and Vietnam or some Laos, such a country is quite weak link in the cyber security domain. So that the Japanese government uses the official development aid to help the establishment of cybersecurity measures in these ASEAN countries. So that is some future possibility to enhance the secure and safe cyberspace in East Asia region itself. So that's my answer. The last point is the 2018 Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace, and it is difficult because even now the norm to protect cyberspace is the many country argues the norm of the cyberspace, but there is no consensus between Western allies and Russia and China. Because the Western allies, including US, focusing on the freedom of information in internet arena, but China and Russia focuses on the national sovereignty to control all of the information flow in the cyber arena itself. So I think it's difficult to have the shared value or shared norms within the whole of the world countries. That's the situation we face now. Thank you very much.
Benjamin, do you want to react? And sorry in advance if the connection is bad. I will cut off your camera, so don't be irritated. So do you have a reaction on the Paris Call for Trust and Security in Cyberspace?
I also apologize. My connection will be more stable. I mean, 3 points. One on the Paris call, and then in the link to what ASEAN is doing, and then after that, the reaction to the talk about attacking is a form of defense. So first, the Paris call is important. It really shows the number of states and even organizations that are really interested in a rules-based world order in cyberspace. So the thing is that in order for the different countries to actually come to a point where we're going to agree not to attack each other, or if attacking each other, have certain limitations, don't hit hospitals, don't hit power stations, then that one has to be, in a way, at United Nations level, which is where the UN group of governmental experts meetings are relevant, and where the open-ended working group meetings are relevant. And even then, as June has just pointed out, the UN group of governmental experts is a series of meetings which is generally considered to be driven by the US and allies, whereas the open-ended working group is a series of meetings which is considered to be was initiated by Russia. And so we have a long way before we can reach some agreement on what the international norms are. But ASEAN has chosen to at least take the ones which are the UN General Assembly has so far ratified, those 11 norms, which include don't attack critical infrastructure, don't let your territory be used, don't attack emergency response teams, as a starting point. As a starting point to, let's say, can we at least among our region say that these are off limits? If these are off limits, then let's see if other people can agree with us that these are off limits. Because at least that is at UN General Assembly level accepted. So when we come talk about why does ASEAN really want to have these rules-based order? Because attacking is not, and cyber attacking is not an option for ASEAN countries. It might be an option for the US, for the UK, which just announced their cyber force, or for some of the Northeast East Asian countries which have the capacity, but seriously, no ASEAN country is in a space where we can launch a cyber attack on anybody. And even if we could buy the capabilities, it's really not a good idea because of our size, the fact that you can't guarantee that you're hitting the right target, the fact that some of these are huge trading partners, so the retaliation in terms of the economy could be massive. So attacking is not an option for ASEAN countries, but norms are.
Okay, thanks a lot. I will shoot two quick questions, and if we have time afterwards, I will again have two questions, maybe more on the PRC, which was not we didn't follow up today. So the first question was, what do the hackers risk in your own countries, in Japan and Singapore? Is it like jail, fines, and so on? And the second question to Benjamin, more especially, is maybe a technical question, what are the entry points of APT attacks in ASEAN smart city designs? So maybe start with June. Do you have any idea of what do they risk, the hackers in Japan?
If you mean the domestic hackers, the government, if the police and the government arrest them, they are going to jail and fine. But the jail in up to 1 year or a $10,000 US fine. So that is the our law. So it is quite I think quite difficult to deter these kind of domestic hackers. But the problem is how to arrest and how to deter the hackers outside of the country. There is no means to arrest and taking them, go to jail or fine them. So it is our challenges. Thank you.
A few words, Benjamin, and since you're a lawyer, it's maybe your field.
Singapore has a Computer Misuse Act, and there are jail terms and fines for unauthorized access, unauthorized tampering, even making and selling of the tools for hacking is illegal. Unauthorized interception, like man-in-the-middle attack, unauthorized interference with access, like DDoS, also you can get jail, you can get fined. And the problem has been, since the initial part where there were a lot of good cases where people were arrested in country. And in fact, we even have one case where we managed to capture one hacker in Kuala Lumpur with the assistance of the Royal Malaysian Police. But beyond that, a huge amount of cybercrime is transnational. And you can't even find where the hackers are. So that, as Jun said, you can, if they're in the country, we can catch them. But if they're not, it's really, really hard. The question of where the entry points of APT attacks in ASEAN smart city designs is like everything. I would think that every smart device is an entry point. I don't know whether that answered the question, but we don't know yet. The smart cities are there. We don't know how many APTs are in the smart cities because we also don't have the tools to go and really go and search.
And we will conclude with two questions on China. The first by Emmanuel Dubois de Prisque on what about the cyber threats on cybersecurity in companies from Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia who are operating in China. Are they particularly targeted, and from the legal requirements of the Chinese state? So it really think about the Chinese law and how, like, for example, the cybersecurity law and how those foreign companies can be investigated by the security services, probably. So this would be the first question, and the second question would be in the PRC, and probably this question is probably for June. is the PRC, when the PRC is in the instigators of cyber attacks, do you have any idea of where does it come from in China and from whom? Is it the strategic support force from the PLA mainly, or are they? Is it some underground hacker groups? More specifically, do you have any insight on these issues?
Okay, there are two questions from the. Thank you very much for interesting and difficult to answer the question. But to answer the first question, branches and subsidiary companies operating in China is weak link of the companies in Japan and also in Europe and the US, because the Chinese APT groups uses this weak link. So firstly, they are coming into the branches of subsidiary companies in China or in abroad. They uses the internal network of the company, targeting the headquarters here in Tokyo or here in or headquarters in the US or in Europe. So it is a quite high risk to protect the branches in subsidiary companies operating in China. So the second question, are these Chinese APT groups? And I agree the analysis of the US government, because the US government announces that recently the APT-10, these group, the people who are working in the APT group in China have a strong tie with state security ministry, so not in military one. So the first one, 5 years before, the APT-1 group that included the several media and the US companies belongs to the People's Liberation Army, so a PLA. But now recently they has changed some kind of strategy, because the military organization unit do such a kind of activities means the retaliation from the military unit in US or other countries. So that reason I think that China has changed the strategy to use the state security related person to do these kind of cyber espionage activities. That's my answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we are running out of time. So maybe Benjamin, you want to add something on China?
Only a comment on the.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Just on the risks of the companies, and I think that as we look into it, after the Snowden revelations, I think it became clear to many countries in Southeast Asia that it's all companies, regardless of what country they are, can be infiltrated, and the technology can be infiltrated by any number of other countries. And mind you, there's many Southeast Asian countries that have experience of the US interfering in their domestic politics. So it's not a surprise. Is it China? Is it US? It could be either. So there is definitely a concern that there is a possibility for many countries to get into many other countries' networks through spies in the employee among the employees, without even having to go through the official channels, which is what everybody's concerned of with China. So that is a reality check that ASEAN countries have to wary of.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. So thank you very much. We have to wrap up the session because we are running out of time. So thank you so very much, Benjamin Ang. Thank you so much, Jun Osawa, for your very clear and insightful presentation. It was really a fascinating talk. So this is the end of our discussion, but fortunately it's not yet the end of our webinar series. On Monday, we will have the honor and pleasure to host Mrs. Audrey Tang, Digital Minister of Taiwan, for a discussion about the impact of technology on society, governments, but also international order, and hopefully we will also talk about something that is very an interesting question in Europe, which is digital sovereignty. So hopefully I will see you all on Monday, and in the meantime, I have a great day in Europe and have a nice evening in Asia. Thank you very much, all of you.